is a real pleasure and an honor to be with you this evening, for on the Jewish calendar it is a full moon, which means it's the 15th of the month, the 15th of Shvat in the Hebrew calendar, also known as Tu B'Shvat. It is the day when we remember our earth and we pay attention to what it has done for us and what we have done in return. And I'd like to, before I introduce the speakers that are going to be talking to us this evening and sharing their wisdom with us, I'd like to share a little bit of wisdom from Rabbi Nachman, who told a story called The Cripple. And it begins like this. Once there was a wise man. Before he died, he summoned his sons and his family and told them that they must water trees. He said, "You must also earn a living in other ways, but you must be especially careful to water trees." And the reason I tell you that story, and the reason that Rabbi Nachman, I believe, told that story, is because in the book of Deuteronomy, we are told people are like trees that both need to be cultivated and cared for and nourished and watered. It's the spirit of life that we inculcate in ourselves, and we learn to take care of the world in which we are cast. And it goes without saying that you know that when God created humanity, he said, "I'm placing you in my garden. I expect you to take care of it." Maybe we've done a less than adequate job, but maybe there's still time to wake up. Tu B'Shvat is the wake-up call, is an opportunity to remember. So with that, if I may say a Baruchim Habaim, how blessed we are to have with us as one of the presenters, Dr. Meira Warshauer, who will be talking to us and educating us, learning us, and Dr. Nina Gray, who will also be presenting and teaching us. We'll be learning alongside of her, and Dr. Kevin McKinney, who will also be giving us, sharing with us his knowledge, and hopefully us not only listening but sharing back, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and Dr. Carolyn Hudson, whose interest in ecology I know goes very well back. They're all trained reality leaders and chapter leaders of the Climate Reality Project of Greater Columbia. And I will, if they need to say anything else about their credentials or where they're from, I'll leave that to them. But I also want to share with you that you'll have the opportunity towards the end of this program to talk back, to be able to give your thoughts and share with them and them share with you what you've heard tonight, and maybe what you haven't heard as well. And with that, I want to say also, besides thank you to Troy for navigating us through this quagmire of technology, that's the best way I can talk about it, and a special thanks to Risa, who orchestrated this evening. And I'll give it over to Risa.
Hey. Erev Tov, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Rabbi, very, very much, and thank you all for being here. I just want to share with you a few ideas that we usually educate children and adults about in terms of Tu B'Shvat, the birthday of the trees. As Rabbi said, it's the 15th day of the month of Shvat, and is actually a new year. Most people don't realize that there are 4 new years in the Jewish tradition. The first one, which comes around Pesach, is the 1st of Nisan, and that is actually the first of the year. It's a fiscal year, fiscal new year, and on these 4 new years, it is when we would collect taxes in biblical times. So we're very lucky that here in the United States, we only have April 15th, other than sales tax, but in biblical times, we had 4 times a year that we collected taxes. So one was on the 1st of Nisan, the second was the tithing of cattle. We collected taxes on people's cattle, and that was on the 1st of Elul, which is sometime in the summer usually. And then the 1st of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, is the birth of the world, and that was another tax time. And then the 15th of the month of Shvat, which is today, is the birth of the trees. And so there was a tax on fruit trees. So as you can imagine, teaching that in religious school is a little boring and kind of removed from them. So we do it in a few other ways. One, we celebrate the Shivat HaMinim, the 7 species of fruit that are found in the Holy Land and that are found in the Bible. And it's said in Deuteronomy, for Adonai your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs, a land of wheat and barley, vines and figs, and pomegranates, olives, trees, and honey, which are dates. And those are the 7 fruits that we try to get children and adults to taste. More adults like them than children, as you can imagine. But so we try to cover those things up. And we also do 2 more things. One, we plant trees in Israel, because back in the day, 120 years ago, there was a paucity of trees in Israel, and so there was a lot of soil erosion. So we encourage the tree planting in Israel, and we also try to get our kids to plant parsley. Why parsley? So that we can eat it, gives enough time to germinate and grow, stick a parsley seed in some soil for the Passover, for Pesach. So we try to connect them to this holiday in those ways. Of course, in the last 20, 30 years, especially for our older children and nowadays even for our younger children, environmental impact is a very important aspect of Tu B'Shvat. And so we are so glad that you are here to share with us, Dr. Nina, Dr. Kenny, Dr. Meira, and Dr. Carolyn, all of your wisdom and thoughts about Tu B'Shvat and the Torah. And without further ado, thank you for anyone who's received their seeds. If you will plant them, we'd love that. And if you're drinking your tea, we don't mind seeing your cups. L'chaim to you. So, thank you. And now I'll bring it over to Meira.
And l'chaim. I love that.
L'chaim.
To life. Just what this is all about, life and creation and living on this earth. First we're going to share an interview, a recording of an interview with me and the music director of the Zamir Chorale of Boston, Josh Jacobson. And it includes a story about a very special tree, which we thought was appropriate in honor of Tu B'Shvat, the new year for the tree.
Hello, Meira. You and I first met when we were both students, first at Harvard and then at New England Conservatory many years ago. And Zamir commissioned you, I think it was 1998, for the 50th anniversary of Israel's founding, and you composed a choral work called We Are Dreamers. And since then, I've been a great fan of your music, especially those huge orchestrations. And you and I have been talking for many years about how we could perform some of those pieces in a chamber version. And I'm delighted that you have adapted a version of your major choral symphony, Ahava, into a standalone piece for choir, soprano solo, piano, cello, and percussion. It is so beautiful, so atmospheric. Can you tell us something about how the piece came to be? What inspired you?
So I just actually made a short video telling that story because I wanted to tell it, and you'll see why. I wanted to tell it in front of a tree. And I was at our beach. We have a home at Bicycle Beach, North Carolina. So before we moved back to South Carolina, where I am now, I'm in Columbia. Before we moved back, we made, my husband helped me make a recording in front of, it's a black cherry tree I'm standing in front of. But you'll see with the video why the tree is so important.
Great. All right, let's watch that now.
In June of 1991, I was on the campus of Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania. I was there for a Jewish renewal retreat, and I was teaching a class on Judaism and the environment, and we were setting text to music. So one day early in the week, I was out davening my afternoon prayers, the mincha service, and I found a beautiful meadow, place overlooking a meadow. And when I finished my prayers, I turned around, and behind me was this magnificent beech tree. And I was really drawn to the beech tree. So I went over, kind of wrapped my arms around her. It's the kind of so big that it would take 3 of me to wrap completely around the trunk. And I was just felt so good to be with this beech tree. And I looked up, and somehow a question emerged. Do you have a song for me? And pretty soon I heard this sound. Ahava, Ahava, Ahava is the Hebrew word for love. So I knew this was really special. And it felt like the tree was just emanating love to me, and like the tree maybe had always been emanating love to all of us, to all of creation, and that not only was the tree emanating love, but probably all of creation was emanating love.
Wow, that is so beautiful.
Thanks. So yeah, that was a really, really special experience that I had with that tree so long ago. And then when I came back to South Carolina, I had a conversation with Nicholas Smith, who was the director of the South Carolina Philharmonic, and he offered to perform an oratorio that if I wrote one for chorus, and I wanted to have a mezzo-soprano soloist, and I wanted to somehow find a way to give over this chant through that composition. I named it Ahava for soprano and chorus and orchestra, and I looked to the liturgy for a way to do that, and the Shema just called out to me as the perfect vehicle. As you may know, the paragraph in our prayer book right before the Shema ends with the word love, V'ahava, with love, that God is choosing us with love. And then we say this here, listen, pay attention, Israel, God seekers, all of you. There's one God in the whole world that's inside of you and that's in all of creation. And that's all there is, just one unity, one holiness permeating all of creation. That's our Shema, that's our call. And right after that, we say V'ahavta, and you shall love. And so it's like returning the love to the Creator, and in the case of the tree, maybe returning love to creation. If creation is singing love to us, can we just please sing love back and love this creation? And so that was my prayer with this composition. And so that in the first movement, I bring back the chant, Ahava, and recalling this pay attention, Shema. And then in the second movement is where I really want to focus tonight as far as the teaching. This is all from Deuteronomy. The second part is chapter 11 of Deuteronomy, and the chapter, verse 13 through 15 is telling us, so if you do all of that you love and you honor God and you follow in ways of righteousness, all will be good, and you will have plenty, and you'll be satisfied. And then the second part says, but beware. If you go astray, and if you worship alien gods, and who might these alien gods be? greed for us, maybe greed, taking the earth for granted, exploiting the earth without returning resources, the fossil fuels that we keep burning and heating up the planet. Are these the alien gods? But if you bow down to these alien gods, then you will not have it. You will not survive. You'll be banished. God will shut off the heavens. There'll be no rain. You'll be banished. So from Avadatem, if you worship these alien gods, but Avadatem spelled differently, you'll be banished. And the thing is, the way I see it, and I learned part of this from Arthur Waskow, who's a wonderful teacher of our generation. The way I see this passage is we're banishing ourselves by the way we're treating this earth, and we don't have a lot of time to change our ways, but we always can. Our teaching is that we can. We still can, and in this case, hopefully there's still time. And so the last movement is the ending of that second paragraph, and it's verse 16 and 17 of that same chapter of Deuteronomy. 16 and 17, it just continues, and 18 and to 21, it says, so don't go there. Place these words on your heart and teach them to your children and speak of them when you're walking on the way, when you're rising up, when you're lying down, when you go through the doors of your house. So I want to share now with you the performance from the Zamir Chorale with that opening part of place these words on your heart and teach them to your children.
Place these words upon your heart and teach them diligently unto your children.
We're going to just continue with what motivates us. And for me, it is about the children and the future generations that we want to be able to have continue to live on this earth. I think of my grandchildren and how they come into this world just like we all did, loving the earth and loving life. And will they have a world to live in, an earth to live in? Will they have air to breathe? Will the climate sustain human existence? The planet will be here, but will there be humans? Will there be animals? Will there be trees? What will be remaining if we don't change our ways? So this is what motivates me and really concerns me so deeply. And we're going to hear now from Nina and Kevin and Carolyn with what motivates them to be part of this Climate Reality Project and their presentation.
Thank you so much, Meira.
And thank you so much for the beautiful, wonderful interview with the video within it and the music. It was just so lovely. And I want to express our appreciation for this invitation to participate, because it's so important to be able to work together like this for the sake of the earth and its beings. The themes of Tu B'Shvat and an important learning I have gained from Rabbi Case and Risa and also Rabbi Arthur Waskow is our human responsibility to be stewards of the earth. Learnings I have gained from the principles of Unitarian Universalism are that we can learn from the cycles of nature and that we are interdependent with and a part of all nature. As Rabbi said, nature sustains us, and we are responsible to sustain our natural world. What I've learned from the climate scientists and the young people who are activists now about climate is that we are in a climate crisis, a climate emergency. As we three share our motivations prior to the slide deck that we will be showing, we invite you to think about what you are all doing, each one of you, and together, or might be doing in a ministry of caring for the earth. So my motivation for caring for the earth and being part of Climate Reality Project: on my way to college one day, I spotted a bright, beautiful, vibrant red vine encircling a tree. It filled me with awe and wonder. Though I was slow to fall in love with birds, my friends Ann and Mark introduced me to bird watching, and it took a while for me to join with them in their deep love for nature, but I was slowly growing into it. And in this century, 2 years ago, my young adult granddaughter Hannah said that she and her friends were so concerned about climate change and what they saw as a dismal future that they were seriously considering not having children. And my heart broke to hear it. And I went to the March 2019 climate reality training, as did Kevin. And I later started a chapter here. Why? For Hannah, for all the children and grandchildren, and all the beings of the earth. And Carolyn will share now what motivates her.
I just joined Beth Shalom this week, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you. And nature and the outdoors have always been my passions. I did graduate work in forestry and geology, and my outdoor adventures included such things as rafting the Zambezi River and camping in Antarctica. I received my doctorate in geology here at USC, and I taught environmental geology for 20 years. And during that time, I was watching the worsening climate situation very closely, and I became convinced that I had to become an activist to save the world for my grandchildren and their peers and everyone else to come. So now I'd like to turn this over to Kevin McKinney.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'll be sharing a screen in a moment in order to bring that slide deck to you. So I'm imagining that Troy is busily enabling that to happen right now. But there are really two things to mention in motivating me. Just the impact that nature had on me growing up. It was a haven. I was fortunate enough to have a small wooded area just across the street from my house in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, when I was a kid. And I remember in the summers being out in the wooded areas in a couple of different contexts and a couple of different places, and just the smell of the woods. Just that is a deep experience. And then today, the other piece of it, well, it's kind of what Nina already said in a way, but right now I have a young piano student, Annabelle, and Annabelle is 6. And that means that when 2100 comes around, she's going to be grandma age, right? She's going to be 95. And yeah, I don't want the world that she's experiencing then to be 4 degrees Celsius warmer than this one. That just wouldn't be a good thing. So it's for the world, the garden that we've been placed in, and it's for the kids. So let me try and share that screen, and we'll run through this slide deck really quickly. All right, so, and I have a few little things to do to make that happen, so let me try and get the sequence of things right. All right, I'm about to hit share, so cross your fingers, folks. All right, it looks like it's happening. So, now I have the spinning ball, and I'm just waiting for the ball to stop spinning so that I can hit play and show you these wonderful slides. All right, here we go. And all right, so now we're back at the beginning. Black screen, starting from the get-go. So what about that garden we were placed in? We're still not right back at the right one. All right, there's the garden we're placed in. Big view. But also, small view. Here's some of the garden that we have here in South Carolina. Unfortunately, that also is South Carolina. That's actually just a couple of miles from my house. I took that picture just 2 days ago. So I'm not just going to say that we should never cut a tree. Obviously, that's a renewable resource potentially, but it can also mean environmental devastation. So we have to be very careful and very intentional about what we do. So 3 questions from Climate Reality. Must we change? Can we change, and will we change? So the first one, must we change? Well, let's start with the atmosphere. Here's a picture of it from NASA. We have the Earth backlit by the sun and just a thin, thin shell of blue atmosphere, just showing how thin and fragile that atmosphere can be. And what are we doing? Well, we're putting tons of man-made global warming gases into that every 24 hours. Should we be treating it as a sewer? Probably not. Here's how the short version of how the science works. Solar radiation comes in, light waves, comes right through the atmosphere because the atmosphere is mostly transparent. Most of this is absorbed by the Earth, meaning the oceans and the land, and so those surfaces warm. What happens next? Well, some of the energy gets radiated back into space in the form of what are called infrared waves. In the old days, they used to call it radiant heat. So you see, if you're not on Facebook, you're seeing those little red arrows going out from the Earth to space. But some of the radiation gets trapped by the atmosphere, and especially by the greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and water. And the more carbon dioxide we get, the more of it gets trapped, or more accurately delayed, in radiating to space. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of it. And here are the sources of those greenhouse gases. We've got thawing permafrost, we've got mining, industrial processes, coal plants, fossil fuel combustion, industrial agriculture, fertilization, land transport, landfills, forests, oil products, air transport, crop burning even. So a whole bunch of stuff. And that's actually not even a entirely comprehensive list. So a lot of stuff. But the biggest thing is the fossil
biggest
fuels.
thing is the burning of fossil fuels. That's right, Kevin.
Exactly. Because that's the carbon that wasn't already in the atmospheric system. Now, here's some of the stuff about how we know this is true. But Carolyn has some expertise in that and wanted to talk about that. So I'm going to invite her to talk about that piece of it.
All right, the ice cores drilled in Antarctica can show us what the temperature and carbon dioxide were like the last between 750,000 and 800,000 years. And at any given point in that core, you can see a picture of one taken. There are tiny little ice bubbles or air bubbles frozen, and they can analyze how much carbon dioxide was in the air at the time this was frozen. And at the same point, they can look at the structure of the ice and tell at what temperature it froze. And scientists have been able to correlate perfectly the relationship between the amount of carbon dioxide in the air and the temperature. The hotter it is means more carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, today's carbon dioxide levels are higher than ever. An analysis of the different isotopes of the carbon from this carbon dioxide has shown that most of this carbon has come from industrial sources like burning fossil fuels. So the ice cores not only show that carbon dioxide warms the earth, but also that most of the current warming is our fault because it's man-made pollutants increasing.
Wow, so it's happening and we're doing it, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And that, I should say, that's only a tiny piece of the science, but it's a really crucial one.
That's the most concise way I could get it. I could talk for an hour probably on why they had natural fluctuation before, but that's nothing we controlled anyway. So this will be it for this slide.
Well, thanks for giving us that window into how we know what we know. I appreciate that. So this is the picture of the warming that's happened during historical times. Going back to 1880, as you see on the bottom scale there, this is a picture of the annual average temperature, what they call anomaly, how it was different from the average temperature. So all along the left, you have these blue bars showing that the years were colder than average. And then around mid-century, you have a few that are warmer than average, and then it goes back again. But toward the recent times on the right-hand edge of that graph, it's just a steady, almost steady upward progression of warmer and warmer and warmer years in red. And in fact, it's kind of remarkable because as you see on this next slide, of the last 20 years, 19 of them have been among the hottest 20. And then all of the last 5 years were amongst the hottest. And actually, we can update this because they didn't have 2020 yet when they made this slide deck. So now we can say the last 6 years are amongst the hottest years ever because 2020 was essentially tied for hottest ever.
Kevin, this next picture, the slide about this woman in the stretcher who's being taken away from the building she's in front of in order to take her to the hospital because she suffered a heat stroke or heat shock. I had an experience very similar to that at the State House when I was doing protesting or some sort of rally that we held there and had to go to the hospital as well. And in addition to that, what we also know is that heat is a problem in many parts of the world and many parts of this country, affecting not only people but animals, crops, and our weather.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just on land. Well over 90% of the heat that's absorbed by the Earth systems ends up going into the oceans. And you can see on this graph how it's increased dramatically over the years. Half of the increase is just from the last 20 years, which is pretty shocking as well. And one of the consequences of that heat going into the oceans, of course, is the strengthening of hurricanes. We don't expect that we're going to see particularly more hurricanes in total, but we do expect to see them skew pretty consistently toward the stronger end of the scale as warming progresses, because heat is basically the fuel that powers hurricanes. So more Cat 5s and fewer Cat 1s, unfortunately. And the slide here, of course, shows a very graphic picture of Hurricane Florence, which most of us here, I am sure, will remember. So, and here's a little bit of the physics of it. This is the hydrological cycle. It starts with evaporation. As the world warms, that energy goes into water. It breaks up the bonds of liquid water and frees up gaseous molecules that end up of water vapor, we would say, and those end up in the atmosphere. Then the next phase, they can condense together, accrete together, form nice big water droplets, and then they rain out. So you get the precipitation phase. And then, of course, it flows down into rivers and lakes and bigger rivers and ends up at the sea, and the whole process starts all over again. So they call it the hydrological cycle. The jargon phrase they have is that warming intensifies the hydrological cycle. And what's the consequence of that? Well, if you're not on screen, if you're on Facebook, this is an incredible image of a big circular rainstorm, extremely intense. This was 2010, I'm not sure where, but it's just an amazing downpour somewhere on the prairie. And this is what Al Gore calls a rain bomb. Really seriously intense precipitation. And that's something that's very much been on the increase. That's an observed trend now. It's not just a projection. And in fact, here in South Carolina, we've had our share of it. We saw a good chunk of that in 2015. And this image shows one of the consequences with the road crew trying to deal with a road that's completely washed out. So more evaporation, more rain, but it also dries the soil more, right? Because that water can be driven right out of the soil. And then you get very dry soil that's not so good for agriculture. You get longer and deeper droughts. And here's a very ugly picture of drought-stricken soil in Brazil, Sao Paulo state, just a few years ago. You could never hope to grow anything under those kinds of conditions that we see in that slide. But wildfires are a problem too. Here we have a graph of the wildfires from 1980 through the present almost in the U.S. And basically we see temperature going up, we see the numbers of large fires growing up accordingly. Not perfectly correlated, but certainly with a very clear overall relationship. And a couple of examples of fire a few years ago, a bad one in Fort McMurray, Canada, near the tar sands, ironically enough. Most of the town, or a good chunk of the town of Fort McMurray, was destroyed. A shocking image just from this last August in California, where somebody is working on the line trying to combat the fire in Ruth Valley, California. So wildfires, a big problem. And here's kind of a summary graph. It's another one of these bar graphs, and you've got extreme temperatures, droughts and fires increasing, floods and mudslides from that extreme precipitation also increasing. You've got all sorts of storms. Yes, they're increasing too. So again, observations, not projections, not theory. And another thing is glaciers. On the left of the screen, a summer glacier in 1935 in Greenland. It was all icy. The entire fjord was frozen. On the right, It's all this kind of aquamarine water, and here's the consequence. Miami, Florida, 2015. All the streets flooded. People wading in the water. And there's no rain. It's all sea level rise. It's water being brought onto the streets of Miami by extra high tides. Naturally, some tides are higher than others, and when sea level rises, this is what you get. Sunny day flooding. We have the same problem in Charleston. We have it all up and down the coast, actually. Norfolk, Virginia is another hotspot. But who's at risk? Well, the top 10 cities, according to this graph, the city with the most dollar value at risk is actually Miami. And then you see a number of other ones. New York, Newark area is number 3, just behind Guangzhou, China. And then you get a bunch of other places, most of which are in Asia. India, China, Vietnam, Thailand. Then the same thing, but you're not by money at risk, but by people at risk. And when it comes to people at risk, India is the most vulnerable place, because Kolkata and Mumbai are the 1-2 cities rather on that list, and then Dhaka is a big one in West Africa as well. Miami's still on there, but they're down there at number 9. So sea level rise is a big problem. Also, according to the Defense Department, this was back in 2014, climate change is likely to bring food and water shortages, pandemic disease, disputes over refugees, of exactly the sort, by the way, that we saw all through the Trump administration, as they were angsting about all the folks coming up from Central America, but also natural disasters all around the globe. And here's kind of an image about that. It connects with that refugees piece. If you can't see it, it's a corn cob. There are 3 kernels on the cob. It's being held open because it's been drought-stricken. It just couldn't develop. There wasn't enough water. It's useless as a crop. And that's precisely what happened in Central America over much of the recent years. And that was a significant driver of migration to this country as well. But the quote here, I think there's been an underestimation of how sensitive crops are to heat and how fast heat exposure is increasing. And that's a worldwide problem. It's not just in the tropics, although the tropics are kind of the most immediately critical. Also, climate change is a medical emergency. You see the reference there if you're on the call. But that's a heavy-duty reference, the guy who's saying that. But West Nile virus started at East Central Africa, spread out basically across the world. Rift Valley fever, not too far away from there. It's across Africa and into the Arabian Peninsula. Chikungunya, also from Central Africa. We restart the animation. You see it spread across Africa into the Caribbean, the Indian subcontinent, Europe, Eurasia. Chagas disease, well, that started in South America, but now it's well established in the U.S., right up into our area even. Cryptococcus gattai fungus, I had to practice saying that. That spreads. Zika virus, of course, we've all heard about that one. And it's definitely a pretty horrific thing. So all these things spreading because the world is warmer and more friendly toward these tropical diseases. Of course, it doesn't help when we ship invasive species around inadvertently by human activity. Change is a big factor. One of the biggest factors is this Aedes aegypti mosquito. She is sitting on somebody and you can see her abdomen full of blood. Because that's what they do, and that's how they pass the Zika virus. Also, I think dengue, but definitely Zika. And Aedes aegypti is in South Carolina, sad to say. But it's not just about species being where we wish they weren't. It's also about species that we've lost. This cute guy is the golden frog. one of the species that's been driven extinct by climate change. And the fear is we are at risk of losing up to 50% of all land-based species in this century. So by the time my little student Annabelle is 85, they could be gone. That would be beyond tragic.
And all of these threats, all that you see on the screen here, you want to them because the people on Facebook won't be able to see them. Species extinction, melting glaciers, famine, water scarcity, ecosystem loss, our way of life, infectious diseases, sea level rise. Kevin, you read the left side.
Okay. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. Political instability, floods and mudslides, wildfires, drought, storm damage, ocean acidification, the equally evil twin of climate change, infrastructure loss, and climate refugees.
And you know, Kevin, all of these threats, including many we haven't even covered here, and the fact that the World Economic Forum says climate change is the #1 threat to the global economy, these threats help to answer the question, must we change?
That's right, and we focus on it's here in South Carolina as well. There's the peachoid, as they call it, up in Gaffney, which is, I put that on there as a quick shorthand for how central peaches are to our identity agriculturally here in South Carolina. But on the right, the headline from 2017 about how extreme weather devastated that crop, because it wasn't only the freeze, it was also the warm winter. Even before the freeze, they had not set fruit very well because there were not enough chill hours.
Kevin, I just learned from Troy that Facebook can see our presentation.
Oh, that's awesome. So we don't have to be quite as graphic in describing things, which will help us move along better. That's good.
Yeah.
Well,
The
and
author
to the algal blooms, I was going to say, Carolyn, you have something to say about that, yes?
Okay, I was going to say before, the author of the article on the peaches was one of my students in my environmental geology class.
Oh, no kidding, no kidding.
God, it was nice to see he's contacted me, before about things. Okay, this is a picture of an algal bloom somewhere in South Carolina. I'm not sure where, but
Bensonville, I think, but it doesn't really matter.
This is a problem that has been made worse by global climate change. You can have algal blooms from too much fertilizer running in the water, but anyway, this one is obvious. Sometimes you can't see them, sometimes you can smell them, sometimes you can't. Often if somebody doesn't know that it's there and they go swimming in it, they'll have skin problems and burning eyes and respiratory and gastrointestinal problems. So this is not a good thing. And last year, DHEC reported it was in at least 4 counties in South Carolina, mainly in Lake Wateree. I have seen a small pond right here in Forest Acres that usually has it. Not big enough, I guess, to get their attention, but the hotter it is, the more of this we get. So that's another thing.
Yeah, Lake Wateree is what you see behind me. That's where we live, so that is not a theoretical consideration for me. So, well, moving on, must we change? Clearly, we must change. So the next question is, can we change? And this gets to possible solutions. We do have a number of them at hand. And here's the green energy projection. It's supposed to be 30 gigawatts by 2010.
Yes, it is. And oh my gosh, it was exceeded by 22 times that. That's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, way more wind capacity than anyone expected at the beginning of this century. And there's just a graph of that, as you can see, showing how amazingly that is accelerated. Well, what about solar? Well, we're not at solar yet, actually, but because they wanted me to note that there's actually a 40 times theoretical oversupply, what we need compared with the theoretical amount of wind energy there could be. So turning to the solar, we were supposed to get 1 gigawatt a year by 2010, but
let's look at that. 17 times that. And then by 2019, 121 times that.
yeah,
Things are beginning to improve a little bit right now because of the change in the Public Service Commission on solar here in South Carolina, but there's still a long way to go.
yeah, that's for sure. But here's the global curve. Again, it's even steeper than the wind curve. And a big driver of it is just the cost. This is just a graph of the declining cost, and it's been very dramatic. If you look at it was almost $80 a watt back in the 70s, and now we're talking about 25 cents a watt. So, and the low cost has some dramatic effects, as you can see.
Oh, I like this slide, Kevin. It's actually taking place in Sudan, Nimuli, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, in South Sudan. And in many countries where there's no universal electricity grid, we are seeing consumers and businesses leapfrogging old technologies and installing solar panels in places that have long been denied access to electricity. That's pretty cool.
It is that.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this is a developing country. It's a middle income country, but here's what they've done in Chile.
Oh my God.
So a lot of capacity, almost 17 gigawatts in just 3 years. There's a potential for tremendous acceleration here, which should be a heartening thing for all of us. And again, just highlighting the potential. We could never harness all the solar energy that reaches Earth, of course, but the ratio is that there is enough in 1 hour to supply all our current needs for a year. So you can do the math on that if you really care to. And here's storage. Storage is important because solar and wind energy are intermittent, so you need to have a capability to store the energy that you generate using those means, because you may not be able to have it when you need it otherwise. But this just shows that we're at the very beginning of a massive deployment of energy storage that is increasingly cost effective. The other side of the equation is to use what we do make in a more efficient manner, and one small piece of that is LED lights. So they've conquered most of the market now, and Nina and I were talking about this. I don't think either of us could remember when we last bought a non-LED bulb, did we, Nina?
No.
Yeah, I don't think
we did.
I don't think either of us.
We did, but I can't remember either. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I don't think we came up with the time, but in 5 years even, they're expecting it to be 95% of the market, and there are many other ways of that energy efficiency can be achieved, and that's an important part of the equation as well. Behavioral change can be important there, but that's a whole other story. This is just a list of all the, maybe not all, but many of the companies that are developing electric vehicles. And again, they're taking off at a surprisingly rapid rate. Volkswagen is doing a big push right now. So can we change? Sure we can. Are we going to? Will we change? Well, you know where we're at in this slide, right? Paris, because of the Paris Accord. And yay, we're back in the Paris Accord. Thank you, President Biden, for taking a very constructive step on behalf of the entire world. We appreciate it. But that agreement to limit emissions exists because of people power. And here's an image of that. That's the People's Climate March. I had the pleasure and privilege of being part of that throng. But that's what it takes. Makes concerted pressure.
You're not going to
Or
talk
change.
about that big wave, huh?
We did that big wave, and it was an audio wave, like a roar that went from one end to the other. It was an amazing, visceral sound. Incredible. So we would like to invite you to join in. Use your voice. Use your vote. You make choices that help us all to fight the climate crisis. Voice.
Use your
vote.
voice, your vote, your choices. Speak truth to power like your world depends on it, because your world depends on it.
Yeah, it really truly does.
Yeah.
And with that, we are at the end of our presentation. Those are a couple of handbooks and resources. We can hook you up with that if you are so inclined. And I will, as soon as I get my cursor to behave, which it's not behaving. Troy, you may have to terminate my share because my cursor is weird. Thank you.
No, it's done. It's good.
I was going to ask Risa whether you want to have the questions and answers and discussion before I give a little kind of closing statement from that.
Sure. That would make sense. So, now's the time. If you have a question, please, you can raise your hand. I did see one that was sort of answered on the chat, but and I had a few myself. Teresa Smith had asked, I guess more to Carolyn, about the algae bloom, the algae that forms in the water. So her question was, does it affect Lake Meira? Does it affect the taste of the water?
Like, as far as I know, Lake Meira doesn't have any. But the water plants, there's a big city water plant on the north side of Lake Meira, and there's also a Lexington plant on the south side, and both of them remove a lot else from the water, so they could pretty well make it safe to drink.
So if I can expand on that, is that missing from, for instance, Lake Watery, where I too have read has an enormous amount of algae? So are those plants missing?
There is Canada does draw its water supply from Lake Watery. As far as I know, that was not affected. And actually, our area of Lake Watery was not affected. It was a number of specific areas, not the entire lake. However, if it gets bad enough, it can shut down water systems. A couple of years ago, Toledo, Ohio, actually had to shut down their entire system for about 3 days due to a massive algal bloom in Lake Erie. So yeah, they can clear it up, but they can also, they can't necessarily always cope if it gets severe enough, I guess.
And until someone raises their hand, I also had a question. In what role do urban planning, let's look at Columbia. I mean, I've been in Columbia for 18 years on massive amounts. Entire exit 22 looks nothing like it looked when I moved here. It was all forest, and it's gone. And I'm just curious, what role do urban planners play with the environment? Is there interaction between the environmentalists and the urban planners?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure any of us knows specifically the answer, but it does bring to mind the work that the city of Columbia is doing step by step to live up to their commitment for the reduction of greenhouse gases. And they are part of a whole bunch of cities and mayors who have made, and city councils who have made that commitment, and they have been doing a little bit here and a little bit there. And there is this organization, CPAC, which is a volunteer organization headed by Dr. Lori Zielkowski, who is fondly known as Dr. Z by her USC students and everybody else. And that organization is working with the city both to encourage them and help them see other possible ways to move forward on some of the areas of the promise that they've been working on. They have a graph that shows the different parts of the promise and the status of where it is, and you can see that if you go online to the city website.
Yeah,
Does anybody else have any answer to her question?
Yeah, that does answer my question. Mhm.
There have been cases where people have destroyed something illegally when building, and when the inspectors find it, they are usually fined, and that money goes to fixing something else in another part of the county, so that they don't get away with it easily.
That's good to hear.
Mhm.
I was going to say, I wish Deb Matherly were on this call tonight, because she's actually a transportation planner by trade. I'm sure she'd have something interesting to
Mhm.
contribute, but transportation is a big piece of it, because a lot of energy goes toward meeting our transportation needs, and how you plan your urban and suburban spaces can have a big influence on what that need actually is. Density, so zoning comes into it. Building codes come into it too. Because if buildings are more efficient, then obviously you use a lot less energy. So there's a ton of things that are relevant.
Deb Matherly will be on the Sunday evening program that Climate Reality is hosting, and I'll be sure to plug that when we have a little more time toward the end.
Harold Klein, you have a question?
Yes, I understand that in a few years, most of our transportation will be electric, and we'll be doing away with the combustion engine, which has been contributing a lot to the downgrade of our atmosphere in the oceans and rivers and streams. Thank you. I enjoy the program very much.
Yeah.
Very enlightening.
Does that mean that we'll all have to drive electric cars? Will I have to remember to plug the car in like I have to remember to charge my phone?
That's right. Yep.
Yes.
And wherever you park, there'll be electric chargers. You can plug it in. There are some now in the parking garages around Columbia where you can charge your automobiles up while you park.
So we're going to start a synagogue charge donation fund to have chargers.
But I was behind solar energy on top of the roofs of the synagogue, and I had an extensive study made, because we at our synagogue, as well as the chapel and the hallways, are flat roofs, and it would be perfect for solar panels. And but it took a lot of investment. I think it was something a little over $200,000, but in 10 years you would be reaping your benefits, because it would start paying off handsomely. But the board didn't buy it, so we don't have solar energy at Beth Shalom.
Well, who knows, that may be up for discussion. I know they've talked about in Jewish circles, there is a movement to have a solar energy Ner Tamid, the eternal flame. It's lit all the time, and there are some synagogues that have one that's powered by solar energy. No. And just in terms of Judaism, I don't see anyone else right now that has a question, but I had a question for Meira. How much have you grown in your understanding of the environment since you composed the Ahava piece and spoke to the tree, and how many ecologists, Jewish ecological study people and professors, and have you just interfaced with since you orchestrated that whole musical piece?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that I wrote that piece. It was first performed in 1994. And then in 2007, I wrote Living, Breathing Earth, my symphony, Living, Breathing Earth, for the very same, motivation. And I kept, hoping that the music would wake people up, and it wasn't waking people up. So then I wrote Tekiah, the concerto for the shofar, because the shofar is our wake-up call. And the idea was maybe the shofar would wake us up inside and we would do the right thing. So most of my work has been through music, and it's ongoing. It's ongoing, and of course, there's so much more need now. There's much more awareness now. I mean, Sam and I have a solar array powering our home in Columbia, and also in our home in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, and before that, we had solar hot water. And I was just listening to, I don't want to be political, but there is a new administration, and Chuck Schumer was interviewing with someone and talking about the new climate legislation that's going to be proposed. And like Harold was saying, it's including charger stations on every block, and being able to drive all across country and having solar charger stations for the automobiles. And I'm sure, when Beth Shalom is ready, there's maybe hopefully through this kind of legislation, there's going to be more subsidies available, because the country is hopefully going to move in that direction. And we have to. I mean, not only Beth Shalom, but everybody will have to. And this is a very compelling presentation from Climate Reality, just to show us the urgency, and also to show us the progress and the capabilities that have been developed ever since 1994. It's been ongoing and in a beautiful way, and we need to keep moving forward with the pedal to the metal in that effort.
Mm-hmm. Of an electric car.
But electric car, that's right.
If there are no more questions, I will go with my closing statement. Does that make sense to you, Risa? The Climate Reality Project is a global organization. Our mission is to catalyze a global solution to the climate crisis by making urgent action a necessity across every sector of society. The Earth is facing a climate crisis driven by fossil fuels. At Climate Reality, we're here to make urgent action a necessity in politics, in business, in every aspect of our lives, everywhere. Urgent action to cut greenhouse gas emissions and speed a just transition to clean energy worldwide. Urgent action to make world leaders commit to stopping global warming through the Paris Agreement. Urgent action to end the pollution poisoning frontline communities and racist policies, deepening inequality planet-wide. We are driven by motivations like mine and Kevin's and Carolyn's and yours, Meira, and we join in partnership with many organizations, and yours, we join in partnership with many organizations like the Sierra Club, Green Faith, and many other groups. We have college chapters, as well as chapters like our local Columbia chapter. And we can be found on Facebook and other social media. The global website is climatereality.org, and chapters can be located at the website. And we have several trainings a year. Right now they're virtual, and people can find the chapters and the trainings on the website. So there are many ways to be a climate activist. One way is to practice sustainability in our daily lives and in our homes. Another way is to support the City of Columbia by encouraging and calling the city to accountability on its climate commitments. Another, to join in an effort to ask cities in South Carolina, our state, and counties, as well as the United States in their legislation, to declare that we are in a climate emergency. We can educate ourselves about climate justice and use your gifts, whatever they are, like yours, Meira, which, I mean, the depth and the spirituality that it leads to this program we've been having tonight is just heart moving. It's so moving. I'm really just, I have no words. You can contribute money or do fundraisers, as I did recently, attend webinars, talk to your family and friends. Hey, learn how to talk to your family and friends, because that's not always easy when you're talking about climate. Use art, music, dance. And by the way, the Sierra Club keeps track of State House legislation to support. So you can go and connect with the Sierra Club, and they are on top of legislation to support, and that's what we're going to be doing to be able to partner with them to be able to do that. And The local climate reality chapter is hosting a webinar, as I mentioned, January 31st from 7 to 9. If you who are still on with us or anyone who's still on Facebook would like to attend, please put your names in the chat. By the way, Dr. Z is presenting at that event. And thank you so much. And now I'm bridging right back to you, Meira.
Thank you, Nina.
Could I just insert a minute that I took the training virtually, and it was really a good experience. It was over 9 days, so we had time to explore things in the meantime, and you didn't have to pay for meals out or hotel or transportation. So I recommend that if people are interested.
Thanks, Carolyn. And it's really great to have your participation. And as Robert Ginsburg said, welcome to Beth Shalom.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to more activities in worship.
Wonderful. So we're going to close with we heard the beginning of that composition, Place These Words, and the ending. It's just where it kind of gets me in my heart. It's where we say, she sings, write them, these words, on your doorposts. And she's talking about, the text is talking about, referring to the mezuzah. And the mezuzah has, which is what we put on our doorposts, on the doorway as we walk into every room and in and out of a room. And that, to me, it's like you can think of that and kind of in every doorway, in every passageway in life that you're walking through. When you think of these words are the same words we just talked about tonight. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. And hear, Israel, the Lord is one. And the same thing, beware, don't go bowing to these alien gods or you'll be banished. And then, place them on your heart. And so these precise words are what are on our doorposts. And so she sings, so that you may live, you and your children, on the land which God gave to your ancestors. So let's just hear the Zamir Chorale close out that music.
Which
Thank you.
And thank you. And thank everybody who has contributed to this evening of understanding better what we have wrought, what we have created. The sense of love and the wellspring of love that the earth has for us, and that God has gifted the earth and gifted us to return back to the earth matters so very much. I know that there's been a lot of fear in this presentation, and that's okay, because the fear that we've heard and the fears that we're facing are real, and to deny them would be false and wrong. And yet at the same time, hope to turn this around, that everyone has something to contribute, no matter how big, no matter how small. All of us has something to contribute to bring this healing back to the earth and to do ultimately what God wants us to do, what God charged us to do at the very beginning of time. Before we conclude, if I may, you probably have heard of Chana Senesh, who was a very brave paratrooper who left Israel to parachute into Nazi-occupied Europe to save Jews. She ultimately was murdered. But she wrote a poem called Eli Eli, which I would like to read to you in English. It's a very beautiful song, but these are the words in English. O God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. And Rabbi Nachman, whom I also quoted at the beginning, also had a prayer for the earth. This was his prayer. Master of the universe, grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and the grass, among all the growing things, and there may I be alone and enter into prayer and talk with the one with whom I belong. Together, there is hope.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope Meira and Carolyn and Kevin and Nina and everyone who came on tonight. Rabbi, thank you for everything. And Troy, for all that you do. I hope that you feel good when you walk out the door tomorrow. It will be 48 degrees. It's going to be nice and cold in the morning. Enjoy the coolness.
Thank you, Risa.
Please plant your parsley. Please plant your parsley. We'd love you to take a picture and send it to us. We'd love to see something grow. Thank you for the education and the everything.